Ages.
When anybody says how well they know you, and Richard starts bragging about how well he knows you, I knew you before.
You remember when I was like this?
I knew you, baby.
There we go. Now we're online. Are we online? Yes, we are.
Wait, did you have any kids in Hong Kong, did you?
No, my kids came only when I moved to Taiwan. Taiwan gave me a good luck.
Yeah, made in Taiwan.
Made in Taiwan.
MIT.
It's all made in Israel.
Yeah. It's the way that Israel.
I don't have kids in America anymore, though.
Yeah, why? How come? Richard, that's so sweet of you to go take care of everyone. What?
I got your knife.
You got my. Okay.
That's all she had. There's no more cookies.
What? There's more cookies.
You guys have a kitchen going on here, a restaurant?
I'm so sorry.
Because Oha used to, because the container just arrived yesterday.
Yes.
Oh, did?
Yeah.
You know, say container in Chinese?
How to say?
Ho, wei.
Hogway. Okay.
Ho, wei. 刚才到了。
Hogway dollar.
到了，成功。
What's that?
And success. You're a great successful man.
I didn't get any pictures from the magazine where our pictures are featured, Richard.
What?
I didn't get any. Me and Richard we appear in.
I'll show you.
It's like the Chabad Time magazine. It's
Yeah.
like
I'm featured in Time magazine.
it's like what is it called? Reuters, Forbes.
Forbes.
Me and Richard, the Chabad Forbes, not the regular Forbes.
Close enough.
Working on it.
All these different rabbis, people know who I am here.
Hold on a second. Let me see
Here. You can tell you it's good news. Who's the one handsome?
Look at this.
What do you got there? What do you got? These are the magazine. Wow. Who's that? That's the rabbi from Cambodia. I thought it was familiar. There's a lawyer, yeah, suing me. It's a lawyer from Cambodia.
Which one?
The guy with the nicest looking guy's him.
Yeah, I know that.
I recognize Amra because who's the guy next to him? I'm wearing a tie.
Old.
Me, I know. I'm very old.
Not you old.
Oh. I respect the elders. When I was his youth, it's all that's it. I recognize you because of your business. That's it. See the tiger always? The tiger something. Okay, so yeah, let me show you. Hold on. Here? You went too far. This is your real hair. It's not color. Kind of chance. Do you have more cake?
Yeah, I brought. Okay.
This is what I'm saying nice things about you.
Oh wow, this is beautiful. This is so nice. I like your suit.
I'm laughing like crazy too. Okay, here's the picture.
So this is me and the rabbi. You might recognize him.
Take a picture.
And then this is me and the Cambodian rabbi. This is the Dutch rabbi. He's the guy who's. See, I held the mic. See, I took the mic from his hands.
Okay, so so there's a story about this guy who used to come to synagogue and used to come last and leave first. Remind you of someone? No. I wasn't looking at you, Jay. I wasn't looking at Jay. I wasn't looking at Jay Rothstein, just for the record. So, once the righteous person, the rabbi of the shtetl, called him for a conversation. He says, let me ask you a question. How could it be, to me, it takes 1 hour to pray. For you, 2 minutes, and you're done. 2 minutes, like that. You got it all covered. So he says, very simple. He says, you live in a big house. You have a wife. You have plenty of children. You have a horse and a buggy. And you have some property. And you have a business on the side because you want to learn Torah, so you have a passive income from somewhere. And when you want to ask God, you want to ask Him to bless my wife, my children, many children. It takes time to specify all the names. My property, my business, my horses, my carriage, it takes a while. He says, I'm useless, homeless, all by myself, all by my own. All I have is one wife and one goat. So all I say in my prayer, God, bless the wife and the goat. Amen. So that's why he has the. Usually, when we speak about righteous people, we speak about pious people, we disconnect them from business life. We usually look at scholars as people who dedicate their lives for study, and business is conducted by other people. And therefore, when we come to focus at our forefather, the one we are handling in these weekly portions, which, by the way, most of the book of Genesis concentrates in him. Only 3.5 portions of Genesis speaks about Abraham and Isaac. There's 3 forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 3.5 portions of Genesis speak about Abraham and Isaac, and all the rest, which is 7.5 portions, all speak about Jacob.
Portions or parshas?
Parsha portions. It's
Genesis is the first book, right?
right. Genesis is the first book, right?
Why?
Why? There's a lot to talk about, right? So let's look at what Maimonides says about those who dedicate their lives for God. And he says like this in Laws of Shemitah: why did the Levites not receive a portion in the inheritance of Eretz Israel and in the spoils of war like their brethren? You know that when the Jews used to go and wage war, so when they come back from war, they had to distribute everything that was looted, everything that was grabbed from the enemy. And this was distributed equally between those who waged war and those who stayed in the back, because they had to support the warriors. And there was one tribe that didn't receive anything, the tribe of Levi. Also, when the Jews entered Israel and conquered it and divided it to portions, Levi did not receive anything. God says, I am your inheritance. Why is it so? So this is what Maimonides offers. Because they were set aside to serve God and minister unto him and to instruct people at large in his just path and righteous judgments. Therefore, they were set apart from the ways of the world. They do not wage war like the remainder of the Jewish people, nor do they receive an inheritance, nor do they acquire for themselves through their physical power. Instead, they are God's legion. So, Maimonides says there's a group of people within the Jewish people that are set aside. They don't wage war, they don't go out to fight with everyone, and they also don't get their portions together with everyone. They don't get a part of Israel, they don't have to fight for Israel. They are the servants of God. They have dedicated their life for serving God, and this is what they have, and this is how things are. And we will soon see whether it's something that Maimonides sees in favor or something that not necessarily. So here we know about our forefathers, the builders, the founders, patriarchs of our Jewish nation. They were people who work. They were workers. They work for their livelihood. Not only were they fighting to get a job, but they were actually quite successful in business. People say Jews are successful in business. We can look at our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know what? They were all very good at what they were doing. They were good businessmen. And Jacob brings this to the top, brings this to the peak. Jacob not only worked part-time, but he worked full-time, and for 20 years he dedicated himself completely just for work. Nothing else but work. 24 hours a day. And not only did he work, let's say he worked for himself, he had a business, he worked for someone. Only later, on a later stage, he had his own financial empire. And Jacob is not embarrassed with that. He says it quite explicitly. Let's look at what in our weekly portion. Already 20 years have I been with you, and your ewes and goats have not aborted. Neither have I eaten the rams of your flocks. I was in the field by day when the heat consumed me, and the frost at night, and my sleep wandered from my eyes. So Jacob says to Laban, after Laban's chasing him, after he ran away, and he's having a lot of arguments, and he says, it's been 20 years I was with you. I didn't fall asleep at night. I was working day and night. I was doing double shifts. And this was something that he was proud of. He was saying that. And this brings us to the question, what does Judaism think about work? Is work something that is a burden? You just have to finish with it? Or it's something that's a mission? And we'll see several approaches to it. And we'll try to determine which ones our forefathers took, which approach they took, and what we could implement in our own lives, like we try to do every time when we bring something from our forefathers. We try to concentrate on what it says to us. Let's put a hypothetical question. If you were born to a wealthy family, and you wouldn't have to work even one day in your life, you.
I'm looking at your picture.
I got you online.
Oh, you got me online.
I'm trying to get
So if you were to born in a very wealthy family, like Jay Rothstein, for instance, just like you don't have to.
I vote for Jay.
You don't have to do. So would Judaism see that in favor? Would you still have to go to work, or since you don't have to get a livelihood, you don't have to struggle, then just dedicate your life for other things, helping other people, studying Torah, being close to God, or whether or not there's something in work, in getting a job that's holy, that's wanted, that's desired by God. Right? By the way, another Swiss guy. This is also from Switzerland, behind you, from Zurich. Yeah. But he's rich. You're rich from Switzerland. Yeah. Yeah. I hope you were as rich as Lionel. Yeah. So this question becomes even more fascinating when we try to look at Jacob. This is what Judaism sees, whether work is something that's enforced on us or whether work is our life mission. We have to work. Everyone has to work. Unfortunately, not all of us. Some of us were born to very wealthy families, but most of us were not. So we all have to work. And the question is, how do we look at that work? You have to go out of your house. You have to travel on business. You need to ship containers and get import and export and duties, right? You wanted to do that. You rather not do it. Is this something that's holy? Is this something that's important? Is this something you would refrain from if you could? I mean, you maybe enjoy your job as opposed to many other people. You do what you like to do and you do what you're good at. So maybe this question is less of a puzzle to you. But most people go to work and they're not necessarily enjoying or feeling like they're fulfilling their mission in life or they're doing what they wanted to do. But they rather work because you have to work because you have to put bread on your table or chocolate chips, cookies on your table, right? That's also a result of work. And here's what the Rebbe is asking about Jacob spending his best years. Look at the quote. In our portion, we are told about Jacob's living with Laban for 20 years. In this time, he apparently wasn't in the tent of Torah, as he was busy serving Laban with all his might. Nevertheless, not only did this period bring him to, and the man became exceedingly wealthy, physical success as well as spiritual one, it was also during this time that he brought up and established the 12 tribes of Israel, which were all righteous. Unlike Abraham and Isaac, which Abraham and Isaac, of course, they both have two sons. Abraham had Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael was not really all righteous. And also Isaac, like we studied in last week's portion, had two children. One is Jacob and the other is Esau. So in fact, Abraham and Isaac never reached complete rest because there was always something negative in their family. Jacob, as opposed, had 12 children and they were all righteous. They were all pious. They all walked in the path of God. They all did. Of course, there were different things that they did that were not perfect, but they were all righteous. None of them was wicked. None of them was bad like Ishmael and Esau. So that's why it says that he was called Mitatosh Lema. This is why it's puzzling. How could Jacob achieve all of that while being shepherd in the house of Laban? We cannot attribute it to Jacob's study of Torah. You could take a chair from there. Oh, there's a chair here as well. Oh, you could sit here next to Leonel. And there's even a cookie for you. Look at that. So here's what we have about Jacob's life. How long did Jacob live? Who knows how long did Jacob live? You know? 170 something? What is it, 100? Yeah, something like that. Let's see what Torah tells us about Jacob starting a new period. 77 years of Jacob. No. That was he lived 100 and something. 77 years are summarized by 5 words. In Hebrew, V'Yaakov ishtam yoshev oalim. He was an innocent man sitting and studying Torah. 5 words, 77 years. Everything we know about Jacob, all the other 7 portions, is from the last period of his life. 77. And Jacob, and here's what our Torah says about this weekly portion. And Jacob left Beersheba and he went to Haran. Rashi says, what does it mean Jacob left? Of course, when you go someplace, you have to leave the place you came from, right? Of course, when you go, you can go tomorrow. You say, I'm flying tomorrow to New York. You don't say, I'm flying from Taiwan to New York. Of course, you're here with me in Taiwan, so you're flying. Why you say leaving this place, going to that place? In fact, there's a reason. And this is what Rashi says. And Jacob left. Scripture had only to write, and Jacob went to Haran. Why did it mention his departure? But this tells us that the departure of a righteous man from a place makes an impression For while the righteous man is in the city, he is its beauty, he is its splendor, he is his majesty. When he departs from there, what are you looking at? When he departs from there, its beauty has departed, its splendor has departed, its majesty has departed. When a righteous person is in a place, the whole place benefits from it, from that righteous person. When that righteous person has to go, there is actually something that's missing in the place he departed from. That's why the Torah says, and Jacob left Beersheba. But the Rebbe explains what we're going to see. It's not only that he left this place in order to go to another place, he was leaving, as in leaving behind. Jacob leaving behind everything he knew, starting a new life. And that's what we're going to concentrate today about this new period in Jacob's life. Until now, 77 years, you don't know him. You just know there was some dude named Jacob. He was a righteous man, he was a pious man. He had no interactions with his surroundings, 77 years sitting and studying Torah. Now, we get an introduction. What is Jacob doing? He is exiting. He's moving out. He's leaving. He's leaving behind a lot of things. He's making a new stage in life. And we're going to concentrate at this new stage and see whether or not it was a positive one. Here, first 77 years, Jacob was an innocent man dwelling in tents. In Hebrew, it's 5 words. In English, it's a few more. Rashi, dwelling in tents. What is tents plural? The tent of Shem and the tent of Eber. The Torah doesn't just tell us that he lived in a tent. Back then, everyone lived in tents. There were no penthouses or anything like that, right?
But how was he able to study Torah if he himself is a part of the Torah? Because if he studies Torah, he already has
Torah is
complete
not just
Torah.
a Chumash.
Yeah, exactly. Torah. In fact, our patriarchs had studied Torah before the Torah was conducted in this certain way. Studying Torah before the giving of the Torah, which is quite weird, I would agree with you. Our patriarchs had studied the tradition of Torah, what they knew until their time. And also there was some element of prophecy where they did know what is going to happen, and they actually studied their occurrences and the occurrences of their children. So there's several ways to understand it. But it says that from the very beginning, it was Abraham that was taught Torah by Noah. Noah was, you remember Noah from the flood? He knew the Torah. He transferred it to Abraham, who transferred it to Isaac, to Jacob. So he studied, and even Jacob studied with Eber, which was Shem was the son of Noah. Eber was the grandson of Noah. They were both they administered the yeshiva there. So they studied Torah. So it was a different, what we know, right? You said the Torah, the stories of Jacob and his children, of course, and his father. It was a different element of Torah, a different level of Torah, a spiritual level of Torah, in which different things existed in different time zones.
That's a good question, right?
It's a beautiful question. Yeah. You could get 2 cookies. You get 2 cookies for this. Okay, so 77 years, he's in tents. Why does the Torah tell us? Everyone lived in tents, in plural. He was moving from one tent to another, not because he was relocating or because his landlord was giving him a hard time. He didn't have to move from his tent because of his landlord. He was going from one tent to another, meaning tents of Torah. He was studying Torah. That's all what he cared about. That's all what he focused at for 77 years, studying Torah in those tents.
Shem was in Yerushalayim at that time?
This was, Yerushalayim, Melchizedek Melech Shalem, right? You were right after Abraham came. So he took out the bread and the wine, and Melech Shalem is Yerushalayim. Indeed, Jacob was a part, of course, in Israel. He was in Israel, brought up in Israel. It was only then after that he left, and then, of course, with the story of his children and Joseph in Egypt, then he had to leave Israel and go to Egypt. The only one who stayed in Israel all of his life was Isaac. He was born in Israel, he died in Israel, never left Israel. Jacob, although those 77 years were surely in Jerusalem, in Israel, he had to leave afterwards, of course, with the story to Egypt. So here's what the Rebbe writes to his father-in-law. The father-in-law was sending him a letter. This was in the time of after the wedding, 1929. They married our Rebbe and his wife, and they lived in Berlin for a certain time. Then they lived in France, where the Rebbe attended university. And his father-in-law used to write him letters, and he wasn't getting those big response. He was getting one-liners, one-lines and he said, "Why don't you write? Why don't you elaborate?" So the Rebbe answers him. He says, "Some people are heavily involved in worldly matters and always have exciting news to share. As for me, I spend most of my time studying, so there's very little to share." He says, my life is not very exciting. What do you expect me to share with you? I'm studying this and I'm studying that. And of course, this is very important and very significant, but there's no exciting news on my end coming. So all this until the age of 77. In the age of 77, Jacob is being requested by his mother to go and find a wife and build a family. Quite interesting that his Jewish mother, even while he was 77, still pushed him to get married. So,
do we know how old the mother was at that point?
Yeah, I don't recall, but it does say the number of years. Yeah, Rashi brings the number of years of his father, of his mother. Yeah, so Jewish mother, even if you're 77, why don't you get married? Why don't you find a nice shidduch?
Those days people live so long.
Yeah, this was the ending of this. Before him, in the time of Adam, 900 years, 800 years, and then in the time of Abraham, it descended to 175, Abraham 175, Isaac also around that time, and then Jacob, and then later it goes back.
We don't know if the year is like today.
Yeah, we have also, this is a question with the science and Torah, whether the age of the world is years as years, days as days, hours as we know them, but we do know the nature was a little different than it is today. So at the age of 77, he goes out there and he says, okay, I've studied enough, now it's time to go and build a family. And in fact, the story is, right, this is what the Rebbe writes in Likutei Sichot. Our portion is called Vayeitzei, literally translated, and he went out. It speaks about Jacob going out of the tent of Torah and arriving into Haran, where he worked for Laban with all of his might. So this was the change. This is the big change that happened in his life. And we want to see what did this do to him, and how do we exactly look at what he did, which is pursuing a work, a profession. It wasn't such a high-ranking profession. It was a shepherd, but it was the best they had in those days, I guess. They didn't have astrophysics, did they? No.
But being a shepherd was a ranking profession.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, okay, it was what, yeah, kind of, it was standard.
It was good for David, Hamelech is good for
Right, you're right. I meant like it was standard, you're right. Yes.
Did they have down scopus where they were up there watching the moon, make sure it was Polish, that kind of thing?
Yeah, but that was about 1,000 millennia afterwards, or I don't know exactly when they started observing the moon.
Abraham is reputed to have known about that.
Right, Abraham was right. They were doing astrology in the time of Abraham. That's why Nimrod wanted to kill him when he was born. They were looking in the stars. Okay, here's what Maimonides says about when a person gets a job. How do you need to treat your job? There's actually many rules that are involve your job. And if you don't do your job properly, not only that you're liable towards your Lauban, your boss, but it also has to do with heavenly courts. And this is what Maimonides writes in Laws of Hiring. Just as the employer is warned not to steal the wage of the poor person or to withhold it from him, the poor person is forewarned not to steal from the work to do his employer and neglect his work slightly here and there, spending the entire day in the seat. Instead, he is obligated to be precise with regards to his time. The importance of such preciseness is indicated by our sages' ruling that workers should not recite the fourth blessing of the grace, right, Birkat HaMazon, so as to not neglect their work. Birkat HaMazon is a mandatory from the Torah, and although you have people that work per hour, if you hire someone for a project, that's one thing, but if you pay someone per hour, and then, the first hour they say, I need to make a call, and I need to go outside, I need to go to 7-Eleven, I need to buy something. They're wasting, not only they're wasting time, they're actually stealing because they are paid by hour. And if they don't if they don't utilize that time to do their work, so then they're actually taking money that's not theirs. So our Torah goes all around saying that a person, you have to do the grace after the meal. The grace after the meal is built from 4 parts. In fact, when someone is a worker, they could skip the 4th part because those few minutes of uttering it might actually take away from the time that they actually need to work, so as not to neglect their work. Similarly, a worker is obligated to work with all his strength. For Jacob, the righteous man, said in Genesis, I served your father with all my strength. We study that from Jacob. Jacob not only go and had a job, but he also taught us how to treat your work, how to treat your workplace. So if somebody is paying you per hour, you have to make sure that hour is completely utilized. Right? You have to make sure you don't waste the time of your employer and waste resources that are put towards what you need to get. You wanted to say something?
No.
And here's what Maimonides says.
What's the end of the lesson?
Further, he says, a worker may not, however, perform work at night and then hire himself out during the day, or work with his ox in the evening and then rent it out in the morning. Similarly, he should not starve and aggravate himself and give his food to his sons, because this leads to stealing from the work to his employer, for his energy will be sapped and his thinking unclear. You see, when you're hungry, you show it to your wife. When you're hungry, you don't think clear. It's like that with everyone. And he will not be able to perform his work robustly, right? So you have, when you don't, not only during the time of the work, but you have to prepare. If somebody is asking you to help them and they pay you, you can't come tired, you can't come disoriented or distracted or hungry, or because you won't think so much and you won't, and sometimes.
The worker has duties seen outside work hours.
Exactly. And we all learned that from Jacob. Jacob being dedicated to his work. Again, it wasn't a big highlight. He was a shepherd. You'd say it's a highlight, then it's still a standard work. But he was dedicated so much that all these rules about a worker is studied from Jacob. Yes?
You're an ordained rabbi, so you don't know the answer to this question, okay? So there are people who...
You said I'm not an ordained
rabbi? You are an
ordained I'm sorry.
Right, he's ordained, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so does that mean that you can't go to school in the day and then work at night, or you can't have two jobs? Because some people need to have two jobs to work. Is that 2018? Are you able to have two, Chabad rabbi, have this job outside?
Well, what if you drive a taxi at night?
Exactly. So it all depends on you. It's very individual. Some people are capable in multitasking, right? Some people, they can walk in the street and chew a gum at the same time. It makes a shortage in their brains. You know, some people are not built for multitasking.
This could be from guys retired.
I'm not retired. I'm very busy.
Basically.
This is a very hypothetical.
No, I'm just saying, like, for example, you're a rabbi.
Well,
Do you teach at night?
the answer is that it's very individual. It depends on what you're capable of doing. But definitely, if somebody pays you to edit, for instance, and they pay you per hour, and then you know that you have other things to do, and therefore you'll be distracted, you can't charge them for that hour completely, because you get paid for it, so you can't take away. It's money that doesn't belong to you. So if you know that you are preoccupied, for instance, somebody works, he takes another job, but he knows now there's midterms or there's exams, right? And they can't go to that, or they have to notify their boss or the one that's in charge. I won't be able to make 10 hours. I can only do 5 hours, and I won't be able to make all that because I'll be too tired, too distracted. I won't be able to do my job. Some jobs are just very easy to right. But some jobs you don't have to think too much, right? You need to.
But right now, if you're working at a donut store, okay, it's not as hard as schlepping a donut.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a little different timing, right?
I see.
It's okay, right?
It depends on you. I mean.
No, sometimes the decision has been put outside the worker. The contract might specify things like this.
Right. But still, the contract could never cover all the nuances, all the details of every single job, of how exactly. I think it's illegal for an employer to require their employee to what they do on their free time. Of course, not things that are related to work. I don't know whether the law improves it in most countries. If you come to work, it's your problem. If you made it, you made it, right? But this is what the Torah says. We have to look at it. Let's look. There's right. Oh, so we're saying this is all learned from Jacob, and our question today: why is Jacob taking work so seriously? Work is just work. Come on, what's wrong with you? Oh, you have to see your watch. Don't work too. Don't be late. Don't be tired at day. Sleep at night. It's just work. You go to work. You get your paycheck, and then you leave. What's the big deal? But Jacob is, and he's all. All these laws are studied from him. Why is it so? So let's look at a very interesting argument in the Talmud. I know you like to study Talmud. Dan, אתה אוהב ללמוד תלמוד, נכון? בגמרא, תראה איזה ויכוח בין רבי ישמעאל לרבי שמעון בר יוחאי. Here's what the Talmud says in Tractate Brachot. The sages taught, what is the meaning of which the verse said, and you shall gather your grain, ve'asafta et voata. Because it is stated, the Torah shall not depart from your mouth, and you shall contemplate it day and night. I might have thought that these matters are to be understood as they are written. One is to literally spend his days immersed exclusively in Torah study. So if you study Torah the whole day and the whole night, you don't have time to go and collect, right? Gather your grain. Therefore, the verse states, and you shall gather your grain, your wine, and your oil, assume it their regard, the way of the world. Set aside time not only for Torah, but also for work. This is the statement of Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael said, yeah, you have to study Torah. Of course you study Torah, but the same Torah that you study also tells you that you have to dedicate time to gather your grain. Literally means to get a job. That's what the Torah tells you. You have to do it. You study Torah, and the same Torah tells you you need to gather your grain. You need to put time to get a livelihood. Let's look at what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says. Completely the opposite. What?
The Rebbe in the letter.
What? The Rebbe letter. He was learning all day. Yeah, that was required from him. That was required from him that time. Well, we'll see. There's another opinion. Let's look. Yeah, there are exceptions. Let's look at the opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was a sage. He wrote the Zohar. This what the Rebbe did was Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Is it possible? Can you read? Can you read from there, or you can't? Okay. Is it possible that a person plows in plowing season and plows in plowing season and saws in sowing season and harvests in the harvest season and threshes in the threshing season and winnows in the winter season and grain is separated from the chaff by means that's called winter season? And he's constantly busy. What will become of Torah? Rabbi Shimon Yochai says, everyone is busy. You're busy. Export, import, documents, duty, custom broker. What about Torah? Who's going to study Torah? You're busy. I'm busy. You're busy. Everyone is busy. What's it going to be? What's it going to be? Rabbi Shimon says, what will become of Torah? Rather, don't leave it just for the rabbi. Everyone has to learn Torah. Rather, look what Rabbi Shimon says. A very interesting thing. One must dedicate himself exclusively to Torah at the expense of other endeavors, as when Israel performs God's will, their work is performed by others. As it is stated, and strangers will stand and feed your flocks, and foreigners will be your plowmen and your vine dressers. That's in the prophet in Yeshaya. When Israel does not perform God's will, their work is performed by them themselves. As it stated, and you shall gather your grain. Moreover, if Israel fails to perform God's will, others' work will be performed by them. As it stated, you shall serve your enemy. From God you shall send against you in hunger and thirst, nakedness, and all want things. So Rabbi Shimon says, you know what you need to do? You study Torah. What about the rest of the stuff? Somebody else will take care of it. Interesting, huh? Not only did he say that, he also did that. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was in a cave when the Romans wanted to kill him. He was in a cave, right? He hid in a cave with his son, Rabbi Elazar, for 12 years. 12 years, they were in a cave. After the Roman Empire looked for them, right? The Roman Emperor looked for them, wanted to kill Rabbi Shimon because he was spreading Torah. So he got to hide in a cave, and God made a miracle. There was a carob tree that grew at the opening of the cave, and there were water. Anyway, they ate carobs and they drink water for 12 years. If somebody else complains about their diet, you could tell them Rabbi Shimon ate carobs and drank water for 12 years. It was okay for him. 12 years they were in the cave, and then a heavenly voice is heard, and they're sending this dove, whatever. Anyway, they're telling him, the emperor is dead. You can leave the cave. You can leave the cave. They leave the cave, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai leaves the cave. In 12 years he was in a coma, so to speak. He was in a cave. And he comes out, and everybody's busy doing their own thing, working. And he says, what are you doing? You need to study Torah. Right? He's been studying Torah for 12 years. Nothing but studying Torah. What are you doing? So, and once they say, what are you doing? Bad things happen to people. Bad things happen to these people, because when he says, what are you doing? It says, Natan Enav. He looked at his eyes, and there were damages caused to the field, to the people. So God says, Le'achriv olami batem. Did you come out to destroy my world? Go back to the cave. Goes back to the cave for another year, just to digest what's going on with the world. The world had moved 12 years. You're saying it's 2018. They told him, what's wrong with you? It's 1211. I don't know when was that. I don't know how many years. Maybe 1,000 years. It's 1118 now. What's wrong with you? Right? So God says, go back to the cave. Come back in a year. Get the feeling of, things are not really the way you think they are. So Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, his opinion, very clear. No work, no job, no profession, no university, no BA, no MA, no master's, PhD. All you need to do is study Torah. But Rabbi, I need to get some food on. Don't worry, somebody else will do that for you. Okay, Rabbi Ishmael said, Torah says you have to work. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, no work. Rabbi Shimon versus Rabbi Ishmael. What Abaye says. Look what Abaye says. This is the same Talmud. The same quote from Masechet Brachot. You can look it up later. Page 35b. Summing up the dispute, Abaye said, although there is room for both opinion, many have acted in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael and combined working and living and learning Torah. And although they engage in activities other than the study of Torah, were successful in their Torah study. Many have acted in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and were not successful. Some people read the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai script saying, I want to learn Torah, and they go to their mother says, what's it going to be with you? Go to university, get a professor, get a job, what's wrong? I'm going to do like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, I'll study Torah. Abaye says, ain't going to work. Many people tried and were not successful in their Torah study. They were ultimately forced to abandon their Torah study altogether. But many cannot, a few, several people are definitely entitled for studying completely. And in every generation and in every society, there's also room for scholars, people who dedicate their lives in study, in research. It could be, most researchers are getting paid for their research, unless they really do something that's out of nowhere. But yeah, definitely a lot of people are not able to find the right balance between the two, and only very few people, their sort of balance is 100% versus 0%. 100% of study, 0% of work. So that's the same Talmud says, many have tried, were not successful. They actually had to abandon their Torah study altogether. So from this Talmud we see there's two ways of looking at work. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai on one extreme says no work. Rabbi Ishmael says yes work. And the Gemara, of course, says what we all know on our own, that indeed it's the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael that's the one that prevails. Let's look at the settling the world. Why is it so important to get a job? Why do we need to get a job? Richard, why do we need to work? So we said, of course, you can't just study Torah. You have to put bread on your table. Not only that you do it because you have to do it, but in fact, it's a mitzvah. Look at what Genesis says. This is the first parasha in Parashat Bereshit. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the sky, and over the fowl of the sky, and over all the beasts that tread upon the earth. And look at what Avod Rabbi Natan says. Just like we were commanded to rest on Shabbat, we were also commanded to work in all other days. 6 days shall you work and perform all your labor, and the 7th day is Shabbat to your Lord your God. You shall perform no labor, neither you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your beast, nor your stranger who is in your cities. So you have to take the verse as it is. God says, 6 days shall you work, on the 7th day you should rest. Many people say, on the 7th day you should rest. They take this verse and they say, on the 7th day, Shabbat, I have to rest. But the verse says, 6 days shall you work, which means that you need to work for 6 days in order to rest on Shabbat. Yes?
But Rebbe, if it says you should work for 6 days and then you should rest, and at the same time it says studying Torah is like working, so it means you shouldn't study Torah on Shabbat.
No. Study Torah. Wait, we said that there were very specific group of people, of individuals, that for them, the study is everything. There's no work, right? So you're asking about these guys or whether they should study. They'll probably find a way to study something that's permissible on Shabbat. There is, by the way, and you're actually right, there is a certain opinion, not only a certain opinion, it's written in halakha, that you don't open up, sometimes opening up a new segment of halakha is actually very difficult. It's a big effort for your intellect, for your brains. You have to work very hard. So according to some opinions, you push it till after Shabbat. And Shabbat is a day where you take it easy, where you take it a little more relaxed. But of course, most people, we don't study the whole week. Whatever we could study on Shabbat, we'll try. It doesn't matter if it's hard or difficult. Some people are actually looking forward to Shabbat because that's a time when you have less pressure, less stress, and you're all relaxed, right? So you're open to new challenges, to understanding, to exploring, to inquiring. So, there's different opinions, but you're right. There is an opinion that says you shouldn't study very hard. You shouldn't choose the most difficult topics for Shabbat. You should leave it for some other time, and then keep Shabbat as a more easygoing.
What do you read on Shabbat? I see you always pull a book out of Shabbat.
I just pretend like I just show you that I do a lot of.
Questions for you. First of all, the cave.
Yeah.
Do you have a fan in the cave or a window in the cave? I guess
they actually, what they did with their clothes, because they only had one set of clothing, they actually used to sit in the sand. They dig in the sand, and they used to sit in the sand completely. And I kid you not, just for their clothing not to wear out. So they used to sit in the sand till here, and that's how they studied Torah. That's where he wrote the book of Zohar. Kabbalah, you know Kabbalah?
Yeah.
That's he got in the cave. So it
was
was quite of an inspiring cave, I must say.
Kabbalah was 1500. We're talking about 2,000 years before.
No, this was Kabbalah was discovered, was revealed, but he composed the book of Zohar about 1,000 years ago. So I don't remember exactly. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was the author of Zohar. Yes?
We traditionally start the new parasha during Shabbat.
Correct, but new parasha doesn't necessarily mean, even within the realm of Torah, there are different topics, different issues that are marked as very difficult to understand. And those are not, again, according to something, is not necessarily those will be your first peak. Of course, there are a lot of people who enjoy mental challenges and enjoy this whole process of thinking and rethinking and getting conclusions and questions. So maybe you could open new topics and you'll have a great time.
One more question. I've studied a little bit of Talmud.
Yes.
A little bit. And I want to ask you, we talk a lot about maidservant and manservant and maidservant.
Yeah.
Do all Jews have servants? And
No.
who can afford them? And also, is your servant convert to Judaism when they work for you? Or they convert automatically?
Okay, so there's several questions in what you asked.
Can you do a quick
Do we
answer?
all have servants? Well, there were periods in history that we all had servants, not only Jews, also non-Jews.
Okay.
Now it's less accustomed that people have servants. Today we have workers, we have helpers, we have servants is a different level of employing someone. I definitely don't know of someone who is a servant, who has a servant. We're talking about an individual who doesn't have the right, barely the right of existence. I guess you read a little bit about the history of the the 1700s in 1800 United States. Black people, slaves. I guess that was the mentality that was practiced. They didn't have the right to speak in front of their master. They didn't have the right to walk with their very. I'm just saying we don't have. It's not practiced nowadays. This whole servant type of deal.
Abraham Avinu had servants, and at least the one of them we know the name, and he was very well respected by Abraham.
Correct, Eliezer. Right, you're right. You're giving an extreme example. I'm talking about servants that are related in halakha. Whether you're entitled to tell them, to revoke them their right to work or to do. Usually, when you have helpers, or when you have, just like I have help, you have people. You pay them for their work, and if you don't pay them, they don't work. It's quite simple, right? Mathematics, yeah. I'm talking to a physics professor. I can't say math.
If you're Jewish, they become Jewish, they have to.
No, so there's such a thing that your servants are to refrain from other things that are practiced by like idol worshipping and all these other stuff. So they're to refrain, but they don't automatically become Jewish. In fact, in extreme cases, if you have a servant and there's 9 people for the minyan, you could actually release your servant. He's no longer a servant, and he becomes automatically Jewish. Yeah, because he was before becoming a servant, he immerses himself as a Jew. But while he's in the water, it's a very interesting process. While he's in the water, before he takes his head out of the water, that's when you proclaim that you're my servant. And when he takes his head, I don't remember all the details, but he takes his head out of the water, he's not an individual on his own, he's a servant of yours. But in case there's 9 people and you need a minyan, you could release your servant. He's no longer your servant, he's automatically, retroactively Jewish. And that's one way of getting Jewish.
So we got a big fight here. We go grab stuff off the street, throw it in the water, and right away they get Jewish until the farm's ready to throw out.
Well, you need to circumcise them. And I'm sure they'll agree for a nice swim in the water, but the circumcision part, I don't know how you're going to market that. It's
all over again.
Yeah, it's getting people off the street. So, as we said, work is not just something that you have to do. In fact, it's something God expects us to do. 6 days you shall work. On the 7th day you'll rest. Just like on the 7th day we rest. Also on the 6 days of creation we work. There's a story with after the Yom Kippur War in 1973. So the atmosphere in Israel was quite depressed. We had actually a few months ago an individual. You were here, right? The individual who served at the Yom Kippur War was a physician. It was a doctor, and he told us a little bit of how things were. You remember no, Yom Kippur War? You were around. My father was also in the military service. Yeah, 1973. 10 years before I was born. Anyway, so the Lubavitcher Rebbe wanted to do something. The Lubavitcher Rebbe wanted to do something for the Jews of Israel. He was sending his moral support. He was sending some financial support. He took this wealthy guy and he says, I want you to go to Israel and I want you to build factories and I want you to get employment for people. They're very depressed. The economy is not doing well. You remember this was after the war. A lot of the resources were diverted to the war. We had someone who was a warrior, who was a physicist at the war, and he doesn't know who won the war, right? The Jews say, the Israelis say they won the war. The Arabs say they won the war. What we say is everyone lost. Because, right, everyone, you can't say it, you can't proclaim it's an exclusive win. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, we have to get businesses there. We have to raise the morale of the people. And he called this guy named Deitch. His name was Deitch, a rich guy. And he says, I want you to go and try to explore how to build factories in Israel. So Deitch, his son-in-law, his name is Zayle, Meir Zayle. He lives in Israel, in Kiryat Malachi, by the way. And he was in the textile industry. So he said, I'm moving to Israel. He's moving to Israel. He's building this nice factory for textile, not one or two, I think, in the south of Israel when they need the most. To there, but the Rom Tzatzich. לא, בדימונה זה קריית מלאכי וקריית גת. קריית גת, קריית מלאכי. And he says, I'm going to build this textile. He was a businessman. He had resources. He didn't have to take loans from the bank because he had money from his father-in-law, who was very rich apparently. And he built this factory and he started marketing, selling clothes not only in Israel but also outside of Israel. And the business became very successful. Business became very successful. What he thought he's doing just as a favor for the Israelis, for the Jewish people, actually became a very big firm that produced many other big brands in the late 70s and in the early 80s of the...
You're talking about Delta?
No, it's called Flocktex. The name of the factory is Flocktex, but they made different brands. I don't know which brand. אולי קשור להם גם פולגת יכול להיות. לא יודע, יכול להיות, אני לא זוכר. Anyways. Okay, the suits, clothes, everything, women's clothes, men's clothing. And this guy used to go like you go in Switzerland to shows. You know, they have shows. So there's ta'aruchot kaele, right? You put a booth, exhibitions, right? They used to go to shows. And usually the shows in those days were from Wednesday through Sunday. Wednesday through Sunday is the garment show, right? The clothing is still in Hong Kong. There's shows, right? Hong Kong, China, you get shows. Yeah. Chicago, you get shows. Right, in New York. That's a furniture show. So he used to go to the and of course because he's a religious man, he's Chabadnik, and he used to put a sign on his booth that he closes on Shabbat. It's closed on Shabbat, right? It's a big company. They make clothing for all the big brands. Nobody know they were Jewish. It's from Israel, a company from Israel, but they're closed on Shabbat. And he put a sign on his booth, on his stand. 2 hours before Shabbat, closed, right? 24/6, closed for Shabbat. So one time he visited back New York. He's from New York. He visited, and he told the Rebbe's secretary about the shows, that he's always going to the show. It always falls on Shabbat. There's always a Shabbat in between. And he closes his stand. That's what he do. Of course, he won't do business on Shabbat. So the Rebbe says to him, the secretary says it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, call him and I want you to tell him something. He says, what? He says, I want you to hang the sign that you close on Shabbat, not 2 hours before Shabbat. I want you to hang it on Wednesday. Why on Wednesday when the show starts? He says, why? Because if you have a customer that wants to see you, if they come when you're already closed and the sign is there, you miss their business. If you put it on Wednesday, they will know that on Saturday they can't make a meeting with you, so they'll do it on Wednesday or on Thursday or on Friday. So just pre-planning. So you could see the concern. Yeah, of course you keep Shabbat, and of course you serve God, and of course you know what God tells you and you do it right. But you have to also think, business is business. Put the sign on a Wednesday. So if somebody wants to see you, you won't miss their business. They can come see you Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then you won't miss their business.
Wait, who said to do this?
The Rebbe.
Jay said to do this?
No.
Jay says this.
Jay does that. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said to do it. Right? He said, hang it on Wednesday already. So in fact, God, in order to provide you livelihood, Benjamin, you think God sent you to Taiwan to get parnasah, to get livelihood? You couldn't get your parnasah in Switzerland or in France or anywhere else. You think God sent you here because you have to do so? There's probably a reason why you're here. But the cover story is because you have meetings and you have to bring metal. You sell metal, you buy metal. What do? You buy and sell. You buy from them, you sell to them. I hope you make a margin.
It's
You make,
called import, export.
I thought you were buying from them and selling them. It's like,
Import, export,
you could
import.
save your time, buy for them and sell them, but make a margin. You will make a much easier business.
Seriously, the way you talk, I'm just like blown away.
Anyways, so really every encounter we have with this world is because there's a reason for it. God gave us this opportunity of being busy with something so we could actually have an impact over the world as a whole. In the Kabbalah world, in the terms of Kabbalah, it's called in Hebrew, refining the sparks. It's brought down in Kabbalah, it's explained in Kabbalah. When God created the world, He implanted sparks everywhere. And a Jew, when we do our work, we refine those sparks. When we get to physical things and we do something positive with it, we refine it, we elevate it, we make it into something that's holy, that's spiritual. We make it, so God makes us all these different things that we have to do. Why? Because only you could do what you could do. I can't do and Richard and Jay can't do. Maybe Richard could do a better job, but he can't do your job.
I know I can't do what you do, that's for sure.
I'm not refining sparks. You have to, when you go on business. Let me show you something, a quote from Yom Yom. So here's how the world works, basically. This is not an accurate diagram. I don't know. So workers, people who work, business people, and you have people who study Torah. And it's not by coincidence. The world works with the people who work. The scholars, you just leave it, nothing will, you make research and they do all these things. But you have to have people to do the real work in the world. It doesn't work like that. God, when somebody says, why am I not a scholar? Why are you not a scholar? Because God chose you to do something in the world that no one else could do. Yeah, everyone could sit and learn. Not everyone. Most people. Most people could sit and learn. Everyone wants to get away from work. I don't like this job. I don't like this boss. I don't like this office. I want to get promoted. I want to move somewhere else. You always do this. Oh, I wish I wouldn't have to go to work. I wish I would have just money. I wish I would study the whole day. You know what? You're not meant for it. If you were meant for it, you would have known it already. God would have notified you in some creative way that God has to notify you. So, in fact, the world works like this, and it's intentionally. So, you're saying, Lionel, you don't have to get upset that you're in university and you're studying and you're getting a degree. It's what God wants from you. If God wanted from you differently, He would tell you. I don't know how, but He would find a way. He has creative ways to give us messages, doesn't He? He does. The point of it is that most people are not meant to be completely scholars. The approach of Rabbi Shimon, just like we said in the Gemara, many people are not meant for it. People have tried it. Some people, they just don't take that. They fail because they're not, exactly, it's not what they're supposed to do in this world. And look at what the Rebbe said, the Rebbe Maharaj, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, to a businessman. This is the Rebbe, he's a righteous man, speaking to God, a holy man, a spiritual person. He's meeting this businessman who wasn't so scholarly, wasn't so intelligent. And look what he tells him. Look at up in there. In terms of scholarship and aptitude, the Chassid Reb Eliyahu Obeler, that was his name, was a simple man. He was a simple man. Once, when he came into a private encounter, my grandfather, this is the Rebbe Arayat says, the Rebbe Rashab, Elie, that's his name in Russian, Elie, I envy you. I'm jealous at you. I envy you. You travel to various fairs. You meet many people. Sometimes, in the middle of a business transaction, you get into a warm discussion about a Jewish saying, a saying from En Yaakov, which is the Talmud, and you arouse the other fellow's interest in studying Nigle, which is Talmud, and Chassidut. This causes joy on high, and the Almighty rewards such trade with the blessing of children, health, and sustenance. The larger the fair, the more work there is, and the greater the livelihood is earned. He says to him, I sit here in my room, people come to me. You travel to Switzerland and to Taiwan and to China, you meet people, you meet Jewish people, and you give them a good word, you say something, you share something from what you study. He wasn't a person that wasn't studying. Don't get me wrong, even the diagram, even the workers, they all need to study. We all have to have Torah in our mind. We all have to have what to share. But the opportunity to share is something that we should thank God for. The fact that we encounter with many people, the fact that we associate, we interact with many people, gives us the ability to reach out to people that not necessarily would know all this. So he says, I envy you because you get to see all these people that I don't get to see. Who do I get to see? People who come to see me. What about all those who don't come to see me? What about all the other Jews? You get to see all the other Jews. You know, you go on business, you open a booth in a show, an exhibition, you travel, you meet people, you speak to other people. You you associate with everyone. And once you convey a message, that actually goes a much further way because you get to see your network is much broader than mine, your social network. So he says, and this is a trade. And who pays you? God pays you. God pays you directly. And he doesn't pay you only with money. He pays you with health, with children, with success, with prosperity, with all the things money cannot necessarily buy. Also with money. He gives you also money. Don't get me wrong. But he says being there and being able to associate with business gives you an opportunity that I don't have. And that's why I envy you. And this is also, we can explain. I didn't do our weekly class last week. I was just a little tired. I was tired from the jet lag. I'm sorry. Yeah. Here I admit. I confess. I confess.
One job.
I confess. I can't even do one job, right?
That's 16.
Yes. So, okay, I'll give you, this is just from last week's. Jacob was putting Esav's clothing, right? Isaac wanted to give him a blessing. You know the story. Isaac wanted to give him a blessing. And Jacob and Rebekah said, you go put your brother's clothing and you look like Esav. And Isaac was blind. You remember the story? He came to him and he says, I want to touch you. And he touches him and he says, Akol kol Yaakov, vayadayim yedei Esav. The voice sounds like Jacob. The hands feel like Esav. Who are you? Right? And he gets the blessing. His father wants to give Esav originally, and he gives it to Jacob. What is this whole story? Stealing his clothing, stealing his blessing? What's wrong? So the Chassidut explains, what is the difference between Shabbat clothing and weekday clothing? Esav's clothing were weekday clothing. You know, you work, and you're busy, and you're doing things, and you dirty your hands, and you have to be there, and you sweat, and you run around. But there's Shabbat clothing. Shabbat, when we say, we don't rest. So Esav's garments are the weekday dress. But Jacob's garments are the Shabbat dress. Right?
Is there any meaning in the fact that you get the blessing while in the workdays?
Exactly. The meaning is that you have to go out to work. You won't get the blessing with the Shabbat dress. Jacob, a person who studies Torah 77 years in the tent, he wants to get a blessing. What's more than that? His father should come to the tent and say, bless you, my son, I love you, you study Torah, you're such a righteous person, you always learn. But in order to get a blessing, what does he do? He wears Esav's blessing. He wears Esav's garments. He wears the dress of a weekday. And that's how he gets a blessing. Exactly. You pinpointed at the point. You got the right thing. In order to get a blessing, you put... So every Jew has two sets of clothing, right? Your wardrobe. What?
You wear Shabbat clothing, wearing a tie, nice tie.
Yeah. Nice tie and Armani suit, right?
Are we talking about that or not?
You have to wear Shabbat clothing. Yeah, that must be.
This is separate, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, Rabbi, I want to ask you a question. I mentioned to you in an email.
Yes.
That, for example, you have talit on right now under your clothes.
Tzitzit, right? Yeah, talit,
why
right.
do you have to wear? It's different. You have to wear talit on Shabbat.
No, I wear this also on Shabbat. I'll explain to you later.
It's double.
Double blessing. I'll explain to you later about it. So. It's a double trouble. So Jacob, to get the blessing, wears Esav's dress, because to get the blessing, you don't have to disconnect yourself from the world. You have to be within the world. Get a job, get a work. Find the opportunity the job brings you. You associate with people, you meet people, you discuss with them, you bring them, you convey them the messages of Torah. You bring them in a nice and a friendly way. You're not a rabbi, you don't have this long beard, people are not scared of you, and you could tell them those beautiful messages from Torah. You could get to many people that no rabbi could ever get to. So to get those blessings, you put Esav's clothing, you go out there to work, and then guess what? Then you're blessed by God. This is what the Tanaim, this is Bar Beirav Dechad Yoma. It's in Hebrew, it's in Aramaic actually. I couldn't find it in English. It's a term, Bar Beirav Dechad Yoma. So this guy, his story in the Talmud, this guy who was a trader, the Talmud tells us in Masechet Chagiga, I didn't have time to translate and put it in. I wanted to. He used to do business for 3 months, 3 months working in whatever he had to do, whatever his business, and come back home for 1 day. 1 day, 3 month work, one day home. When he goes home, he meets his wife, he meets his children, he sits with them, and then he goes to study. Goes to the yeshiva, to the shul, to the synagogue in his neighborhood, and he studies Torah. And then after the next day, he goes back 3 months. 3 months, 1 day. 3 months, 1 day. So the other guys, when they saw him in the yeshiva, they used to tease him, right? They used to tell him, Bar be'rav dechad yoma. You're a rabbi for a day. You're just a sage for a day. Once you think, is this how you're going to be turned to a sage? Is this how you learn Torah? 1 day in 3 months? Rabbi Yochanan, of course, we know he saw in him, in this individual, a great man. And he said, do not belittle this guy. You think he's a rabbi for a day. In fact, the day that he dedicates for Torah, is even much more than what you do. You don't have all those burdens that he has. You don't have to take care of all the businesses he has to take care of. You study Torah the whole day and the whole night. You don't mock this guy because he takes advantage of the only free time he has. So in fact, you call him a rabbi a day. I also call him a rabbi for 1 day. Within that day, that shows us that in fact all those 3 months that he didn't study Torah, it's because he couldn't. And as soon as he has an opportunity, he goes out there and study. So this gives us a lesson. Everyone is busy, everyone has businesses to run. But if you have some free time, and if in that free time you dedicate some of it to study Torah, to do mitzvot, to do good things, so God looks at it as if the whole time you were doing those study, that you were doing those things. So in fact, this brings us to what Jacob wanted to teach us. So you see, our forefathers, sometimes they teach us actively, and sometimes it's passively. We just look at them and we see what we need to do. So Jacob going out there for 20 years, serving Laban, working hard. He doesn't sleep at night, and the sun hits him in the summer, and it's cold for him in the winter, but he works very hard. It's to show us that working hard is not a burden. It's a mission. It's something that God entrusted us with, and therefore we have to do it. We have to do it happily. And when we have free time, so we need to take advantage of it and learn whenever we can. Okay, any questions?
I have a question, I can't remember what it was.
Okay, first I'll stop the recording before you say something silly.
Okay, now.
Before you say something silly.
Stupid, right?